The Ukrainian intelligence agency SBU has conducted a devastating strike against the Russian Air Force. On the 29th anniversary of the handover of the last Ukrainian nuclear weapons to the Russians, the Ukrainians struck several airfields filled with nuclear-capable bombers of the Russian Air Force. In those strikes, numerous of those irreplaceable bombers were destroyed. This will have massive strategic implications, but we'll talk about this as well as about what exactly happened, all of this here in this video. So what has happened? The SBU has conducted a sabotage action against the Russian bomber fleet. The code name was Operation Spiderweb. In total, 4 airfields were struck. Belaya in Siberia, Oenia on the Kola Peninsula, that's close to Murmansk, Diaghilev, or something like this. Diaghilevo, 200 kilometers southeast of Moscow, and Ivanovo, 300 kilometers northeast of Moscow. We have videos of those attacks that we are going to watch here in case YouTube causes some problems. In that case, you'll find the link to the original videos on my Substack in the description. Those are the videos from the drones, and we can see them flying here, and you already see the fires of already struck targets. Let's go a little forward. We see a first one burning, and this is clearly a Tupolev 95. This is another Tupolev 95, also clear signs of fire. A third one that is also burning. And this here in the background is another plane on another video. It's easy to identify as an Antonov AN-12, a turboprop transport plane that is used by the Russians. I think we should be able to see that in a moment if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this is the Antonov 11. But we see this is not an observation drone. This is one of the strike drones, so this was still looking for another target. The fact that the video ends shortly after this does not mean it has not struck something else. There might as well be something further in the background. We have a second video of, I think, the same airfield. Here we already see the first Tupolev 95 burning. Here we see fire of the second one. And you see the tires that were on the plane to give it some kind of protection. Here, obviously, a drone has just struck. And here is the Antonov 12. And the video ends at this point as well. These are some of the videos we have from these attacks. The damage is so devastating that the Russian Milblogger fighter bomber is admitting today will later be called a black day for Russian long-range aviation. And I think he's perfectly right. Oenia, the attack on Oenia was especially successful, as the Tupolev 95 were fueled up, as we could see with the sizable fire that was visible. The interesting part is before the Russians were shuffling around their bombers, as this article of United 24 Media was saying, and they were saying that the Russians had just sent a fair number of bombers to the Oenia airbase, which was filled with 40 Tupolev 22 and 3 bombers, 11 Tupolev 95, and 5 Antonov 12. Well, some of those will no longer fly away here. According to the Ukrainian journalist Yuri Botusov, more than a year of planning was prior to this strike. SBU agents brought 150 attack drones and 300 explosives to Russia. From the pictures that are visible, every attack drone was apparently carrying 2 explosives. 116 of the drones were successfully launched against 4 Air Force bases. The drones were transported in containers, which is one of the pictures that was published here. So we have the drones in packages on next to each other, placed here. The interesting part is, if we continue, those are containers and they look like normal containers, and we can clearly see this is the roof just moved to the side, and here it's moving further. That's how they start. So it was an invisible double roof that was hiding the drones and allowed for the containers to be moved around, even surviving inspections or having a good chance of inspection. Local civilians were filming the events. We have here a video where a Russian is talking about it, and we should in a moment see one of the drones launching from one of these containers in the background. Here it is. Here you see the drone. It just started and then is flying to the right. And in another video, we have that here too. We see one of the drones just launched and flying off towards the background, while civilians are standing next to the container and just filming it. And I think in a moment we see a second drone being launched from that container. And we hear shots as well, shots being fired in the background. I know that the audio is off, but some of those videos have music as well, and in the end, so the drones are being engaged by small arms fire, and I think there is the next one launching. So this one was standing right next to east where the drones were launching. This wasn't all though. Here is a video that is supposedly showing how civilians were trying to stop the drones from launching by, for instance, hitting it with stones and something like it. Obviously fairly dangerous, as they were carrying explosives and could have probably killed them. But this will be one of the reasons why only 116 were successfully launched. And as you can see, at least some of the drones were still successfully launched, unless there was a second container here in this event as well. The drones itself were, according to Butusov, guided by the Russian mobile network. That's at least the report. It could obviously be false as well, like in PR reasons in Maskirovka to misguide the Russians, but obviously the cell phone network is possible to help the Ukrainians control the drones. The drones were used during the day to allow for a surprise, as the Russians would have expected strikes at night. And according to reports, they were guided by an automatic AI system and automatic software that would help them find the targets. We have this here too, according to which they found a van already on the 11th of May that was carrying suspicious equipment. We see here, it's unclear whether that was directly connected, but at least it seems obvious. This one was found close to Moscow and by the Russian law enforcement agencies, so this might have been connected, but so far at least this is unconfirmed. The reports are also that artificial intelligence was used to train the artificial intelligence to find the targets. The Ukrainians used the Poltava Museum that has Tupolev 95 and Tupolev 22. We can see them here and here on this place. These, we can also see them here. This is a Tupolev 160. This is a Tupolev 95, and this at least should be, this should be a 950. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, that's a 160, I think, and that's a Tupolev 22M. So the Ukrainians were able to train the drones with the actual planes that they were supposed to strike later, obviously helping machine learning and thus a successful strike. The attack was done and planned before by the Ukrainian intelligence, and as we can see, the Ukrainians were checking the weaknesses of the planes. They were marking where the best hits should best be achieved, and we have a video that shows the Ukrainians actually being successful with this. This is another video from the airfield we initially showed, and you can see that the drone is flying in and now hovering over a Tupolev 95 and aiming at exactly that point that we can see here at the wing root, where it now starts to descend. And as obviously the Russians were unprepared, it can take its time and doesn't have to charge in and just do minor damage. It simply glides down to exactly the wing root where it was supposed to hit, and that's where the video cuts off them because obviously it hit its targets, and that should be one of the Tupolev 95s that were then taken out. All of this here so far, from what we've seen, the damage is not completely assessed yet. The attack happened during the day, and intensive air defense preparations by the Russians, electronic warfare and guards were helpless. They were not able to stop it. The Ukrainians report that 41 Russian planes were hit, were reported to be struck, among them strategic bombers as well as transport planes. By now, the SBU is saying that 34% of Russia's strategic bomber force was hit. Hit doesn't necessarily mean destroyed, even though from what we see so far, everything that was hit does not seem to be likely to be ever repaired again. Visually, the confirmation so far is limited to 7 Tupolev 95 and 1 Antonov 12. It's likely that it was actually significantly more. There are, for instance, a lot of videos from different airfields with clear columns of smoke from the airfield in the background, but in each case we can't necessarily identify which plane was hit or if a plane was hit. We'll probably see it in the next few days on satellite pictures, as the wreckage will not disappear overnight. Ukraine also said that all its agents returned safely home, and one lorry driver was arrested. He was in panic, running around because drones were starting from his truck. He said that he was told to drive there and wait to be picked up by someone else. This seems that, again, the Ukrainians were able to conduct a strike with persons not even involved in this, like they did with the Kerch Bridge, where an unlucky truck driver did not know that he was carrying the bomb that was supposed to destroy the Kerch Bridge, and obviously that one killed him as well. The trucks, it seems like the Ukrainians plan to burn down the trucks at the end. Several pictures are from different of those trucks that are burnt down in the end. In one, you see that it's already burning and has already taken damage to the side, and somebody seems to enter right before it explodes. So they seem to have been rigged for destruction. There's also a report that another of these trucks was apparently having a malfunction in Amur, that's in the northeast of China here. And this is an indication that it was planning to hit the Ukrainka Air Force Base in Amur that is also having strategic bombers. This would be an indication that one attempt was done here as well. With the attack in Irkutsk, it already showed that the Ukrainians are able to operate far away from home, and they just blew up a barracks in Vladivostok, just a little south of this event here. So this might be true, but I have not seen a convincing geolocation of this here. So this might turn out to be fake news at a later point. But let's talk about, so we talked about what happened. What does it actually mean? Now, Russia has only a limited number of bomber planes. Tupolev 95 and Tupolev 22M are no longer being produced for quite some time. So it's basically impossible for Russia to restart production. They can't be replaced. Tupolev 160 has re-entered production, but the production is very slow as of now. So it is nowhere close to be able to replace the losses that were likely being suffered. The exact amount of damage so far is unclear, but as said already, we should see satellite pictures fairly soon. But the implication now is Russia will have to protect almost everything. Russia, as we know, is the biggest country in the world, which means it has targets on a huge area. From now on, the Russians know that they can be attacked anywhere. Now, hangars, especially reinforced hangars, could protect planes, but it would mean high costs, as the Russians have to build them at every single one of their airfields to protect the planes. Drones like this, like the ones used right now, would be too weak to hit a reinforced hangar and destroy the plane inside. But especially to build a hangar like this for a strategic bomber with a wingspan like a Tupolev 95 is a significant financial undertaking, as it takes a lot of effort to build a reinforced structure at this size, allowing a full plane like this to enter this. Russia is currently actually building reinforced hangars, for instance, on the Crimean Peninsula to protect its planes, but they are neither all finished, nor are they being built everywhere, nor do they have enough for their strategic bombers as of now. But even if the Russians reach a point where they have built enough reinforced hangars for all their planes, then there are still tons of other potential targets. There can be fuel depots, refineries, fuel transports as well. And especially if a train loaded up with gasoline or something like this is being struck like this and it burns down, especially on a bridge, it can damage the bridge quite significantly, as happened with the Kerch Bridge during the attack we already talked about. By coincidence, a fuel train was right next to the truck that blew up, and that burning fuel damaged the bridge and the railroad track and stopped traffic there for a long time. So from now on, Russia has to be afraid to be struck all over its countryside. And the containers that are being used to transport goods into Russia will have to be checked a lot more. There is never 100% certainty, but the Russians will in the next few days tell us where those containers come from. They will probably find the roots of it, and we should see that they were exported from Ukraine to somewhere and then moved around to then enter from a neutral country, for instance, Georgia, into Russia. This will mean that the Russians will have to put a lot of additional resources to check on containers entering over their land borders in the future. This will not just take additional resources, this will also slow down trade, which can also cause economic consequences. But the consequences in the military and strategic way are also really significant. First of all, we should expect the Russians to do a revenge attack in roughly a week. This is more or less what the Russians will likely need in mission planning to do a sizable attack. It would be likely that this will be a new record-size strike, probably including the Oreshnik medium-range ballistic missile. According to the yesterday, just on today, the Russians did a new record strike with Shahid drones. I think over 400 were used in this, but we should expect an even bigger strike out of revenge, maybe even touching some targets that were so far left out, as the Russians will likely feel the need to show their own population and the nationalists that they are able to hit back even harder against such an embarrassment. The Russians, according to the military balance, had so far 57 Tupolev 22 M3. They had 31 Tupolev 95 MS as well as 27 Tupolev 95 MS Mod. They also had 6 Tupolev 160 and 7 Tupolev 160 Mod, plus another 3 Tupolev 160M that were currently in testing. So the numbers of Russian bombers was very limited to begin with. And the losses that the Russians have now suffered, as said, so far only 7 Tupolev 95 are confirmed. Only in quotation mark, because even that would already be a really painful blow, but it's very likely far from the full extent. Those losses will be extremely painful. This is likely a third or more of the bomber fleet that was taken out. This part of the script was, by the way, in before the Ukrainians said that 34% was hit. So we are at a third, according to the Ukrainians. This cannot be exaggerated, how devastating this is to the Russians. But there is a but too. One Tupolev 95, one of these bombers that we see here, can carry 16 KH-101 or KH-555. This means that for the usual strike package that the Russians are using, Russia won't need more than 1 or 2 of those that are operational for the usual size of the attacks against Ukraine. Usually the Russians use significantly less than 16, so the Russians could just use, in most of their strikes with KH-101s and KH-555s, they could just use one of those bombers. This means that there should not be an expectation that there will be significantly less attacks with cruise missiles against Ukraine, just even if the Russians have just lost 1/3 of their bomber fleet. So far, the Russians have always used numerous Tupolev 95 for those strikes, more than were necessary, very likely to reduce the stress for the plane, as obviously a fully loaded plane is asserting more stress to the cell of the plane, and those are ancient planes. So not loading them up fully is better for the longevity, I think it is the word. So for the lifetime of one of these bombers, it's better to not fully load it. It's also better to allow more crews to train and so on. So in this case, it makes sense to not fully load the bombers if you don't have to. But it means that at the same time, the Russians can do the strikes with 1 or 2 or at most 3 of these bombers if they are fully loaded with cruise missiles. So from this point, the Russians will not be forced to reduce their strikes. That at least seems likely. But there's another but to that as well. The Russians don't have these bombers just for fun. That should be obvious too. Russia strategically needs more than 1 or 3 of those bombers that are operational. First of all, they have a high maintenance requirement as they are ancient planes. Realistically, probably at most we have a 30% ready rate of these bombers. That shouldn't be much of a surprise because they are old and they require a lot of maintenance. And at the same time, the military wants options and reserves. So if a strike is flown against the Ukrainians, the Russians still want the capability of to use those bombers with nuclear-tipped cruise missiles against NATO, for instance. And if they don't have any planes as a reserve, that would be devastating for them. So the fact that they will have enough planes to strike the Ukrainians does not mean that this is just a scratch for the Russians in this case. Also, the Russians need those planes for power projection. Quite often, the Russians are now flying around the Japanese islands, and if they do that, they usually use Tupolev 95s to impress Japan and show their presence and to intimidate Japan. But for that, they need Tupolev 95 that are ready, that are flight ready, that are not used in something else. So with a strike that destroys maybe a third of the Tupolev 95 fleet or even more of this, those patrols might be much, much rarer, or they might stop almost altogether. For Ukraine, this means it's not going to be a direct impact, that it's directly going to be easier for them along the front line. But for Russia, it's an unmitigated catastrophe. There is no sugarcoating this. This is a catastrophe. If the number of 40 is somewhere close to the reality, this would be a damage that is felt for a very long time. Russia will very likely need at least 15 years, if not longer, to replace the losses with Tupolev 160. It might be quite a lot longer. And for Russia, this means a significant damage that cannot be exaggerated. Maybe a third of the most flexible part of their nuclear triad was destroyed in this attack. This means Ukraine has damaged and endangered Russia's nuclear triad, and with that, the security of Russia. This means they also assert pressure in regards to a potential ceasefire, because the Russians now have to consider whether to escalate even further, or whether it might be smart to not be attacked like this ever again by rather making peace. Obviously, this could lead to some fears that the Russians might use nuclear weapons, but that still seems highly unlikely, as the backlash would be tremendous. So for the Russians, this is pressure right in front of the second round of negotiations inside of Istanbul. If the Russians want to keep their bombers, the Ukrainians could say then they better should make a ceasefire. And the question is also, if Ukraine can attack targets like this, what else can they attack? This means the gigantic Russian countryside will need to be protected. The Russians will have to use a lot more resources to protect critical infrastructure, to protect critical military assets from now on, to prevent any further repetitions. They will have to control the containers that enter the country a lot more thoroughly. This will eat up Russian resources in intelligence era, in security forces era, but also in questions of air defense. And all of this cannot be used against the Ukrainians in Ukraine itself. So this helps the Ukrainians in these regards as well. So while we should not expect a lower number of cruise missiles being fired against Ukraine. That seems unlikely. Regarding the carriage capacity of the Tupolev 95, it still is a tremendous success of the Ukrainians, which cannot be exaggerated and which we have not seen much in this war. Maybe the sinking of the Moskva, but I don't think it comes anywhere close to this, the sinking of the Moskva. This is much, much bigger than the sinking of the Moskva. This is probably the toughest hit the Russians have suffered in this war so far at all. That was it from me for today. If you like it, thumbs up, you know the drill. Leave a comment if you have something to add. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching and I'll be back.